I think I learned that kind of BS detector, lack of self-seriousness, and kindness and generosity from my dad, and I think we work hard to pass that on to our kids.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Life of Dad Show. Here in the Life of Dad Show, we talk with athletes, actors, entrepreneurs, CEOs, musicians, entertainers who've all made a name for themselves, but the one thing that is most important to them is being a dad. For this week's edition of the Life of Dad Show Rewind, I'm showcasing the interview I did back in episode 95 of the Life of Dad Show with Bill and Willie Geist. We talk about their work on the Today Show, Morning Joe, and also the book that they wrote together, Good Talk Dad, The Birds, the Bees, and the other conversations we forgot to have. So without further ado, let's get into it. Here is my interview, the Life of Dad Show Rewind with Bill and Willie Geist. Enjoy. Hey everybody, it's Art Eddy for the Life of Dad Show, and on the line, I'm so happy to have Bill and Willie Geist on the line. Thanks for taking the time to chat, gentlemen. How you doing?
Thank you.
Great, Art. Thanks.
Doing well.
Yeah, I really want to talk about your book. It's called Good Talk Dad, and it's a great read. Willie, this one's for you. How long was this book kind of in the works?
Not that long, believe it or not. Somebody approached us and said, have you and your dad ever thought about doing something together? And I guess we'd always talked loosely about working together, but we weren't sure how. We worked at two different networks, and there were all kinds of things that we maybe could have done but didn't do. And then someone had said, you should do something together. And I think it was really spurred by when my dad announced 2 years ago that he had Parkinson's, publicly anyway. That was something that we hadn't really talked about as a family. I mean, my sister and I didn't know about it for 10 years. My mom and dad kept it. So we said, that's kind of strange that we didn't talk about something that important. What else haven't we talked about? So then it turned into birds and the bees and drinking and all these sort of big talks that you're supposed to have with your father that we realized we hadn't had. Now, it wasn't, I don't think we lost anything by not having them. We had a great family, and my dad and I have a great relationship, and whatever we did seemed to have worked out pretty well. But so we thought it'd be kind of funny to go back in time and have these talks now that I'm approaching middle age. It's even more awkward.
Had to talk with him about the dangers of alcohol last week.
A little late. I'm not going to lie, a little late.
It turned out we had a lot of material because we hadn't really sat down and had big talks. You know, you think you'll have these talks walking in a forest with bluebirds flying around. You think you'll sit down on a rock and talk about life, but you never do.
Talking to people just anecdotally, I'm not sure how many people actually have ever had that talk. It's not, maybe it was kind of comforting knowing it wasn't just us. People say, oh, hell no, I didn't sit down and talk to my dad about sex. Are you kidding me? So I think it's one of those ideas that's out there that you sit down with your dad and he's like a passing of the torch and here's how the circle of life works and all these things. And no one actually has that talk. Come on.
Right.
No.
We didn't really,
don't.
Neither one of us really wanted to have it.
No.
I tried once to have the talk with Willie. We were watching a Yankees game on television and just kind of casually thought the moment might be right. Do you have anything you want to ask me about sex? Just looked at me like I was crazy and said, do we have any pretzels?
Just change the subject as quickly as possible. That was my approach. And I think that was the last time we ever went into the subject.
Yeah. At some point I realized we'd passed the point of no return.
Yeah, I think there's the good intentions that the talk wants to be there. I have two daughters, 6 and 3, and I always said to my wife, you know, when you do have the sex talks, I want to be there. I want to make sure that they can get a man's perspective and all that, and they can ask me anything. But I say that now, but we'll see what happens.
Yeah.
Yeah, especially with girl. I'm with you. I have a 6-year-old daughter too. I'm under no illusions that I'm going to have any contribution whatsoever into what she knows about that.
I definitely left that with Willie's mother.
Yeah.
For sure. Because I really don't know that much about it. I was afraid to have the talk with Willie because I was afraid he'd contradict me. You know, kids in primary school know more than I do.
Yeah, I think we learned a lot from the health class. I think my dad tried talking to me and was like, yeah, I already learned about that. I'm good. It's like,
Exactly.
What did you say, Willie? You described it as a health teacher would come in and put in a movie and turn out the lights and leave.
Well, yeah, it's like even the health teacher whose job it is actually doesn't want to have the conversation. They put on the Miracle of Life, they turn off the lights, then they go stand outside and have a cigarette while we giggle. While we would giggle in the back of the classroom. Like, all right, everybody got that? All right, recess.
We had charts, and they were kind of generic kind of charts for male and female. And so for a long time, I thought that male had males had genitals and women didn't. It was as simple as that.
You can see, Art, why this talk was not going to go anywhere. That's the kind of information we were working on.
Oh, that's great. You guys are both New York Times bestsellers, and this book I know will definitely get there as well on that list. But just reading this book and just seeing, just talking to you guys right now, it wasn't almost. I don't think you guys were like even your intentions were for that. I think it was just kind of pass on almost like a family heirloom of sorts for future generations. Am I right in that, Bill?
I think so, definitely. Willie's talked about that a lot, about it's something we have. It's sort of like when I did a piece on my daughter's wedding. It was really just to get a free wedding video, not have to hire somebody.
But yeah, no, I think there's a lot to what you said. I mean, we started out, and it's fun to sit around and tell all these stories, and hopefully some people buy the book. But honestly, I mean, who gets a chance to sit down with their father or their mother or anybody in their family and recant every great story from their lives together and their lives, my dad's life before me, and get them all down in paper? And someday I can just hand this book to my son or my daughter or my grandkids and say, this is who I was as a young boy, and this is who your grandfather was. And I don't know, that's pretty special. So that was a huge incentive to me, and I think to my dad too, was to just have now we have a history book, family history.
I've said it's a little unnerving, maybe disturbing to see it all in one volume.
It is.
I didn't realize the magnitude of our quirkiness. Not dysfunctional, but quirky.
Well, speaking of that, I mean, what was the process like for you guys to decide what would be in the book and what some of the stories you just keep private?
We sat down and we started ticking off with my mother, who was a huge help in this book, and my wife, Christina, who I've known since I was 11 years old. So we have all this history, the four of us together. And so we sat down and we kind of made a list. Oh, okay, what about that story? Right, remember that happened on Christmas and all these things. And I think we just took, honestly, the funniest ones. And if there was a great story and it was rich with detail, we would tell it. And if it was a shorter sort of one-note moment, we have these little Geist dates in history that we wrote up, and we just kind of made those like little one-paragraph, like interstitials, basically. I guess we left some on the cutting room floor, but we definitely have all the highlights in there.
Nice. Some of those stories you guys kept in there. I love the fact, Willie, with the going to the game and going with your daughter and just bribing her with treats. I totally get that, man. So, I mean, I think that this book, kind of like what we do at Life of Dad, we try and bring all these fathers together with these stories that people can relate to. And just when you get there with your daughter and she's like, how long we got to be here? I've been there. And it's like, I think there's some Swedish fish. Let's go get you some.
Willie used to do that when we lived in Chicago. He was born in Chicago, and we would go to the Cubs games. And of course, nobody pays much attention to the Cubs. But he after he'd eaten everything imaginable, probably about $100 worth of food, he'd ask if we could leave.
Yeah, I mean, the story you're talking about is when I took my daughter a couple of years ago up to a Columbia University football game. Somehow I was able to get tickets. We took the subway up, took the one train, and I basically couldn't get anyone else to come with me. I'd been trying to get my wife. I thought that'd be cool, like an Ivy League game on a Saturday. Like, it's not about the game, it's about the experience. And so she never would go to me. She was always like, why am I going to sit in the cold to watch two schools I have no relationship with whatsoever, and they're terrible at football? Like, is that your sales pitch? So I got my daughter. She was 4. We rode up there, and it was all about like just getting moment to moment with these little pops of sugar. And so we sat down. She said, how long do we have to get here? And I'd hand her something out of the bag, whether it was goldfish or Swedish fish. Finally, I had to just tell her, because she was really wanting to leave. I said, at halftime of these games, they have hot chocolate. And she was like, they have hot chocolate at this game? I said, yes. So that got me to halftime. So I figured I had, a good hour of football. And then somehow, I just kept stringing it along, and she stayed, and I don't think we made it to the final gun, but we stayed for most of the game. And it was truly one of the most fun experiences we ever had, the two of us sitting there watching Harvard play Columbia in football, and her asking me these incredible questions. The Columbia Lions have the Lions roar comes out of the scoreboard when they do something good, and it scared the living hell out of her, and to the point where she was packing up her bag. Dad, there's a lion at this football game. Like, what are we doing here? What have you taken me? And then there were lions all, on the program and on the press box. She saw lions everywhere, and it was freaking her out. So we had to talk her down from that, get her some more sugar, and on it went like that for 4 quarters.
And I think there's a historical similarity between going to a Cubs game and going to a Columbia football game.
Exactly. Similar competitiveness.
Yeah.
Bill, and one of the things you guys were talking about going fishing, and there were certain things that you said that for you, Bill, your dad, there were certain things that you didn't learn from him, and you wanted to make sure that you were going to teach Willie. So I think that's great, and it's also a lot of things too where I'm not the handiest person around the house, so there's certain things if I want. I mean, like I said, my daughters are really young, but when they get older, I'm going to try and show them how to do certain things that I'm fully capable of teaching them. But I like the fact, Bill, that you wanted to stress that in the book and make sure that, you know what, just because I wasn't taught something doesn't mean I'm not going to teach my son or my daughter. So I thought that was a really good point.
Yeah, well, I thought I could learn along with him. But, I mean, just so you don't present yourself as an expert and I'm dad and I know how to fish and camp and all that kind of stuff, because nobody ever, I said my dad played the piano, didn't play catch in the yard. It's just, I think as long as we played a lot of these games, golf included, really with just a sense of humor.
But the great thing about my dad is he made the effort, even though he was upfront about the fact that he sucked at all these things. But we did them anyway. Like, we went and played golf. I'm like, all right, how do we play golf, Dad? He's like, oh, I don't know how to play golf. We just go out there and spray the ball all over the place. Or we'd go fishing, and we'd stand in the surf, wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning, stand out there. In fact, there's a famous scene in our family where we're surf casting early in the morning, and a fog has settled in. We've cast hundreds of times with no return, and I was kind of going along with it because I figured my dad knew what to do. And finally I'd had enough, and I looked down through the fog, and I say, hey, Dad. I screamed down the beach. He says, yeah. He goes, this really sucks. And he said, yes, son, yes, it does. Like, of course it sucks. That's not the point.
That's the lesson.
We're hanging out and we're enjoying something that sucks. So
well, I think that's true. I think we probably have more fun playing golf than a lot of people who are very serious about it.
That's true. Yeah.
And fishing certainly goes. It's nice to catch a fish once in a while. We go out with professionals on a boat occasionally, so at least we knew what they look like.
Yeah, there is a point at which it stops being fun. If you never hit a fairway and you never get a fish, at some point it's over.
Yeah, although some of his more memorable shots, he hit one off a light beer truck.
I did, yeah.
Bounced back into play.
Drilled the side of a passing, moving beer truck, and it bounced back into play. It was an amazing
shot.
Yeah.
Oh, one in a million.
Take that, Tiger.
Yeah, right? I love the fact, though, too, Bill, you said during that whole fishing story, you're just like, what is it about every other sport you don't have to wake up, for this ungodly time for it, but for fishing you do. It's like, why can't they just have like a small breakfast and have a large lunch? I love that.
I think it's something genetic. Engineering can come up with something, I hope.
Yeah, or go at dinner time or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, or just come in frozen packets.
Yeah, that's your approach. Just go to the Kroger and buy a frozen fish and bring it in.
Fish sticks, Mrs. Paul's.
I love the picture you guys have in the book where it's like a recently purchased fish, in quotes or
I think truthfully, that was funny. I think we did one. There were 3 people. Not one of us. We brought home one fish, probably lying on the beach.
And so you went and bought some frozen to supplement it?
They do in the tournaments.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I don't want to spoil it too much for our listeners, so make sure you check out the book, but also kind of moving on to your guys' career and all that. Bill, you've been doing TV for a while, covering the news, and now obviously you see your son doing a great job following your footsteps. There's like a lot of mediums out there today, a lot of technology. If you could pick one, Bill, one thing that is available now that wasn't back then, what would be one thing that you would love to have as a reporter with the use of technology?
Well, I think it's interesting because it's changed completely. I mean, now you can Google things and find stories that way. And I think that it was kind of very difficult in the old days without such resources. But at the same time, it kind of cheapens the stories, because everybody's heard them and they've heard them the day before the paper was printed, or if we do a weekly TV show, they've heard it during the week, and so it's still a challenge. So I don't know if I like Google or not.
It's amazing to me. I mean, how many times a week was your About New York column, Dad?
Twice a week, and
Twice.
3 in Chicago.
Yeah, so he's writing 3 columns a week for the Tribune and 2 for the New York Times back in the 70s and 80s. With like, you're just going out into the world and finding stories. I mean, it's such an alien concept to us now because you can access everything in your office. But he would just pick up a big heavy phone, start calling people, or just literally like walk out the door of the New York Times into New York and be like, "Huh, I wonder what the story is today." Like, that's an amazing knocking on doors and talking to strangers the way people don't anymore. I think it's really, it's admirable, and it was more difficult. But my dad somehow, 3 and twice a week, he did it and did it really well.
You had to keep your eyes open, read all the papers and magazines, and I got a lot of ideas, just walking to work.
Nice. I love that.
New York's a great place that way.
Oh, yeah, definitely. And Willie, when you started kind of working out on TV and all that and started getting into your career, what was like the biggest piece of advice you asked for your dad?
It's so funny. People ask me that, and there's another case. I'm not sure we really had to talk about that. I mean, okay. My dad always says when he was going into his career, his father, who had run a little newspaper in Fisher, Illinois, a small town, told him, "Don't go into journalism." Well, then when I graduated college, my dad said to me, "Go work on Wall Street." or he, the joke he always had was, "I noticed our plumber pulled up in a Mercedes the other day." So they're like, there are other ways to if you want to make some money, there are other ways to do it. But so I don't know. We didn't really sit down and talk about it. I think all I could say is that by his example, I knew that his job was fun and that his life was fun and that he got to meet really cool people and go to fun places and go write stories and do it in his own voice. So I would just say, we never sat down and talked about what I should do, A, or B, how I should do it, what kind of career I should have inside journalism.
Kind of osmosis.
Yeah, but I watched and I knew it was a fun life, so I went into it.
We shot a lot of pieces at our house in New Jersey when we lived in New Jersey, and so Willie would come down. I mean, I can remember times that we just went over one because Jody's mother passed away, but there was one piece we were shooting where she was, Willie's grandmother was in the garage counting chads from that year, and Richard Hatch, the winner of the Survivor show, was standing naked next to her.
My dad did a bit at the end of every year on Sunday morning where it was like a year in review, and the garage door would come up, and it was everything that had happened that year, and it was 2000. So there's nude Richard Hatch standing next to my sweet grandmother, E.E., who's holding up the ballots and counting the chads. That was the example I had.
I've always said I'm a sucker for fun, and I think Willie has a little of that in him too.
Yeah, you guys definitely do that. Now we're going to switch over to fatherhood. Bill, this question's for you. When you were raising your kids, what were some of the morals that you guys looked to instill in them when they were growing up? Again,
we didn't have any of the big choices. I don't know what falls into the morality category exactly, but one I think was to try to be nice to everyone. That's moralist. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. I never stated it that way, but that's the major one.
Yeah.
And I think probably why I'm struggling with this is their mother probably taught most of that.
Gotcha.
Mothers are still the most important to the parents.
And for you, Willie, do you kind of find? I certainly do it when I talk to my kids about certain things, mostly if they're getting in trouble. But do you kind of find yourself saying things to your kids that your dad has said to you back in the day?
Yeah, I guess so. My dad wasn't, let's be honest, a huge disciplinarian.
Okay.
I think my mom dropped the hammer most of the time, but I think we stress the same things, again, just by watching my dad, which is, be kind to people, be generous, don't take yourself seriously. That's always been a big one. My dad and I, we always laugh and love like larger than life people in the media and celebrity world who are just so deadly serious about themselves and their brands and all that stuff. So I think I learned that kind of BS detector, lack of self-seriousness and kindness and generosity from my dad, and I think we work hard to pass that on to our kids. It's funny, you don't remember how you don't feel like you're teaching your kids to be funny or have a sense of humor, but I guess it's in the culture of your house and of your family, and then they start saying things that make you laugh, and you're like, where did that come from?
Kind of your world.
And I guess they're kind of watching you too. Yeah, it's your worldview a little bit, I guess.
Yeah, they're like sponges. They soak up everything. And my last question is for both of you guys. Bill, you can answer first. What advice would you give out to new dads out there?
New dads. Well, I'd say that to guide them kind of in an oblique fashion rather than head-on collisions and sitting them down. I think a lot of it is a dialogue that continues. And I think is to spend as much time with them as you can, because I have a lot of questions about what quality time really is. And I think there's no substitute for just time itself, because a lot when you're together, you do I hope that Willie would take cues from what I was doing and get it again through osmosis, better than just stating, coming home, seeing them once a week. And
yeah, I think I probably got that from you too, Dad, because I mean, my dad had a very busy job, and he worked hard at the New York Times and worked a lot, but he was on that bus home, the short line from Port Authority, and made it home and got dropped off and ran out and coached our Little League games. And I was not one of these kids who looked up in the stands and said, "Oh, Dad's not here." How's that going to impact me in life?
I was always on the field yelling.
Well, there's that. He was a big
yelling at the umpires.
You wouldn't know it because he's such a likable, mild-mannered fellow. But he was a bear in the stands. He'd come after the refs hard. Not at me. He was just yelling at the refs mostly. So, but he was always there, and I think hearing him say that's so true. And I think I do that too. There are nights when I'll be frustrated if I have to go back out and do something for work or do an event or something, because it means I'm missing one of those precious 3 or 4 hours that I get to see my kids in the evening and have dinner with them and hang out. So I think time spent is really it.
Very cool, guys. Thank you so much for taking the time. Continued success with this book, Good Talk Dad. People, make sure you read this book. It's a great book on fatherhood and just about life and everything else you guys are doing, obviously, with your shows. And it's been a real pleasure talking to you. I love this book, and I can see you guys definitely had a good time writing this.
We did. Art, thanks so much for having us on.
All right, you guys take care now.
Thanks
all right,
again.
bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks so much for listening to the Life of Dad show. You know where to find us, lifeofdad.com, and on Twitter and Facebook.
Noise you couldn't quite locate or explain. Couldn't quite locate or explain.